Hello, I'm Rob Slade, owner of this establishment, S3 Training Center, and welcome to my podcast, You Can, You're Still Here. A podcast will be running every week, and it'll be going over everything to make your life the happiest and the most fulfilling you can possibly make it. Today, we're going to start talking about stress, and we're going to talk about panic and how you resolved it and how you thrived after it. And it's going to go by a personal experience of mine. Have you ever had an employer or a coach who's actually gone through, maybe even a dive instructor, who's actually given you a bunch of tasks, demanded that you do them correctly, do them on time, but never bothered to teach you how to do it? Well, I had an experience like that, and it was a pretty stressful experience that I had. And a number of years ago, it got actually 1980s, I actually wanted to be a Navy diver. That's what I wanted to do when I got out of college. Of course, being a type 1 diabetic, no one was going to take you in the Navy, and they certainly were going to take you in any commercial diving schools. So near my house was a dive shop that also ran a commercial diving operation. And all the time, they actually had a help wanted sign. I was like, God, don't they ever get enough help? So I decided, you know what, I'd really like to get a chance to work in a dive shop, at least get as close to my dream as possible. So I went in the dive shop, and believe it or not, they hired me almost on the spot. I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm a good diver, but I'm not a Jacques Cousteau. What was the reason they hired me? So I found out by working for this man for about 2 weeks and realizing that divers came in and out like a revolving door. The way he treated people, he had no retention rate of any employees at all. And he'd get dive jobs and always run up short on divers. So one day in the shop, he comes up to me and says, Rob, how would you like to become a commercial diver? I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Are you really serious? Me become a commercial diver? He says, I can train you. You can be my apprentice. He says, you actually lasted longer than 2 weeks. So I'm like, okay, well, that means I'm at least in on that. So my experience and my education on becoming a commercial diver happened in 2 pool classes. He took me to a pool, gin clear water, and that's where I learned how to use the helmet, learned how to use all the equipment, learned how to use all the tools, and that was the extent of it. After pool class number 2, I get a call at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's Mike. Rob, how would you like to see the world, have adventure, and have excitement of your life? And I knew what he was like. He kind of BS'd a lot. And I said, okay, Mike, cut to the chase. What do you want? He said, I got a dive job down in Curtis Bay. A tugboat snagged the deck line, and we need to go down and cut it loose. I'm like, okay, well, why can't it wait till morning because it's dark? He says, well, for 2 reasons. First off, you're not going to see under there anyway. And second, they got to leave with this tugboat with a barge full of asphalt up to Philadelphia by 7 in the morning. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'm going. He says, be down there in half an hour. So I go down there, show up, the drive down to Curtis Bay. There's not a whole lot of detail about what we're into because I don't think he really knew. So we get there, we pull in, and there's the captain there, almost in a panic. He's like, you got to get this thing unsnagged. I think we have about 100 foot of 4-inch deck line wrapped around both props, and we got to leave with this barge at 7 o'clock, and it's now 2. They say that gives us 5 hours. That means get suited up, get down, get the job completed. You have the engines fired up, and you're towing that barge that now has a deck line wrapped around all around it up to Philadelphia. So I get suited up. Mike puts all the gear on me and everything else. We check it out. And then he says, okay, over to the ladder. And I start climbing down the ladder. I turn my light on. I have a headlight on the helmet, which was fine, looking at climbing down the ladder. But as soon as I got in the water, all I saw through my helmet was like coffee with extra cream in it. And so that made me actually a lot worse because closing my eyes or being in the dark would have told me, well, you can still see, but the lights are out or your eyes are closed. Having a light on and not being able to see just raised my anxiety level to a whole nother level. So I was sitting like, oh my God, now I can't see. So then I started moving along underneath the hull of the tugboat. And as I move along, I start feeling like I can't breathe. I said, I feel like I'm gonna die. I cannot breathe. I wanna rip this helmet off and I wanna shoot to the surface and just get out of this mess. I'm saying, I don't need to be a commercial diver anymore. I don't want to do it. I feel like I'm going to die. I can't breathe. And then I said, you know what? The only thing worse than staying down and feel like you're going to drown is going back up and facing his wrath when you get up there and you now have chickened out of the job, the one and only dive job you got in front of him. I said, that's worse. So then what I decided is I got to get my crap together. Somehow or another, I got to figure a way out of this mess I'm in. So what do? I go over and I grab the rudder of the tugboat. Couldn't see it, but I could at least feel it, and I grabbed on it. It gave me a little bit of stability down there to actually feel like I'm a little grounded. Then what I did was I took a couple breaths. Nice little breaths to say, okay, now I can think. So then I started thinking my way out of this. My right side of my brain started talking to my left side. The right side of the brain is common sense. The left side is panicking and ready to lose the cookies. So all of a sudden, the right brain goes, so what's the problem? Left brain goes, I feel like I'm going to die. I can't breathe. I literally feel like I'm going to suffocate down here. And the right brain goes, Rob, but you just took 2 breaths. Remember how relaxing that was to take 2 breaths? Yeah, but I feel like I'm going to suffocate. Right side of the brain goes, you ever get up in the middle of the night and have to go to the bathroom and you can't find the light switch? I said, yeah, and I fumble around for it. I said, do you stop breathing? No. Do you suffocate? No. Do you die? No. So is there any reference? And what was really getting me panicky was not being able to see. And he said, is there any correlation between not being able to see and not being able to breathe? I said, you always have to have such common sense. So I said, you're right. There is no correlation between me not being able to see and me not being able to breathe. I said, okay, first problem done, but I got 2 more coming up. And he said, second problem. Left side of the brain says, I feel like I'm going to drown. What happens if this helmet fills up with water? I'll drown in this thing. Well, right side of the brain says, is it attached to your neck collar? Yeah. Is the neck collar attached to a harness on your body? Yes. Is there a rubber gasket between the neck collar and your helmet? Yes. Is the helmet made out of solid fiberglass? Yes. It's not going to fill up with water. I said, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. It's not going to fill up with water. Problem number 2 solved. Problem number 3 was, what happens if my air gets cut off? I will not be able to breathe. What happens if somebody cuts the hose line to the surface? I'm not going to have any air. It says, okay, reach around your back. And I reached around and I see there's a valve back there. What do you have on your back? I said, a thing called a bailout bottle, which is like a mini scuba tank. Okay? If your air does happen to get cut off, you simply reach around, turn the valve in instant air, enough to get you out of there. So I said, wow, you've made common sense in everything you just said. So what I determined was anything that was causing me to panic had no ground in a reality whatsoever. There was no reason why I should have ever thought anything I should have thought. I went through and said, okay, not being able to see has no correlation with not being able to breathe. I'm not going to drown inside the helmet because the helmet's firmly secured and it's not going to leak. And second, I have an air supply on my back. So all 3 of the things that were terrifying me went away just like that. Just like most things that cause panic. If you look back and see, and you did an analysis of any time you've ever went to panic, and saw that most of the things and the reasons you're panicking have no ground in the reality whatsoever. So once that happened, I said, well, okay, so this is not so bad, I'm okay. And then I said, okay, now take a couple breaths. Right side, take good 4 or 5 breaths when we get started. Left brain said, okay, you got this. And the right brain's telling me, inhale nice and slowly, exhale nice and slowly, really, really slowly. And it was like a tranquilizer. I could have checked my heart rate and found it dropped 20 beats in just a matter of 15 seconds. So now I said, okay, now I'm calm. And the next step and the final step to getting me out of my panic stage was go to work. Go get doing busy stuff. Get busy. Once I started the dive job, which consisted of taking the little cutoff saw and cutting off section after section of 4-foot rope off of both props, and then putting it in a basket, hauling it to the surface, and doing that for basically over 4 hours of doing that. You're too busy to worry about panicking. I was too busy to realize I'm breathing. I was too busy to do anything but work. And that had a tranquilizing effect in itself. The 2 things that happened by doing step 5 was it reduced my panic, reduced my stress, but second, it made me get good at what I was doing. I was doing so much of it that I was actually becoming a pretty darn good diver. And all this in the dark. I literally could not see what I was doing the entire time. After 4 hours, about 6:30, I had both props free. All the rope was gone. I come back up, the captain of the tugboat says, okay, one more thing you gotta do. You gotta go down and get the remainder of the deck line that's laying on the bottom. We cannot leave it sitting on the bottom of Curtis Bay. So down I went 30 feet. I found the rope, tied it onto another rope. They hauled it back up, finished the dive job. I went from feeling like I was gonna panic to think I was the hottest crap in the world when I came up there. These divers, these captains were, and the crew and everybody else said, man, awesome job, that was incredible. I said, yeah, I know, I'm good. I'm really good. And one of them actually came up to me and said, well, God, how long have you been doing this? I'm like, you really don't want to know. I said, you really don't want to know. And even the dive shop owner commended me on my job that I did. And I looked and I said, okay, a number of years later, I became a full dive instructor. I became a scuba lifesaving and accident management instructor. And what I did was I basically taught scuba rescue. And then I also taught relieving yourself of anxiety, stress, and anything that might affect your performance as a diver. Lo and behold, I get the textbook. And it's showing these are the 5 steps you use to relieve panic and relieve stress. Number 1 was stop. What did I do? I stopped, I grabbed onto the rudder, gave me a nice little base of support. 2, breathe. That's exactly what I did. 3 is think. I had the right side telling the left side what to do, and the thinking process solved everything. What was the next step? Breathe again. What did I do after I thought my way out of it? I took a couple good, nice, deep breaths. Number 5 was react. React to me was go to work. I went to work, and before you know it, I took a really, really bad situation and turned it around pretty much on my own, but it was pretty much textbook. And I have used that process through my entire career. It became standard as part of my instruction for scuba class, teaching those 5 steps to relieve panic and stress. And I now do it all the time with athletes. When athletes get stressed out, they feel like they're losing control, we stop, we take a couple breaths, we talk about it, and we take a couple more breaths, and then we go back to work. We go back to doing it, and it's amazing to see what it does. And again, my situation was sort of different because unlike a sport where you're not shooting correctly that day or you're getting beat on defense, I could have actually lost my life. That was pretty serious. So I use this as my mantra over and over and over again to help you relieve stress. And it works. Now, the only other thing I could say was, don't get in that stress situation to begin with. In other words, I could have saved myself a whole lot of problems if the owner of the dive shop would have trained me correctly. It is not advisable to go from learning how to do this in a gin clear pool to dumping in the bottom of Curtis Bay into basically coffee and cream and expect it to do work you've never done before. So next week, what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the 3 steps I have that avoid the whole panic situation altogether. When I told my scuba rescue students, I said the best rescue you make is the one you never have to make. Preventative. Stop it before it happens. And a lot of that can always be done in training. So had I done my training the way it should have been done at a dive school or something like that, I would have never run into that situation. Now, I'm going to teach you next week on how to make this so that it applies to your sports, to your job, to just about everyday life. And I hope this was informative for you. I'm going to have these every week, and they're going to be going on every topic possibly known to man that will help you live your life to the fullest. And again, next week will be about stress in sports, and we'll talk about the 3 steps I have to keep yourself from going into this type panic mode and this stress mode. One more thing I'd like to say, though, is if you have a medical issue dealing with panic and stress, make sure you seek your doctor's attention. This is not a cure-all for all the panic and stress you can occur. But for most of everyday stress and things that may be bothering you, use the technique. Again, stop, breathe, think, breathe, and then react. Those 5 steps go a long way to help reduce your stress. Have a great day, everybody, and I'll see you next week.